and we're back with one more episode for Diffusion podcast. And today we have Tudor Iliescu, a founder of an initiative that aggregates solutions and network state. Not only that, but also online communities. Tudor, it is an absolute pleasure to have you here today. I'll give you a small space for you to introduce yourself, and then we can deep dive in everything that you're doing at the moment.
Thank you for the invitation. Thank you for having me. Yeah, I'm Tudor. I'm originally from Romania, now based in Romania. And I started the Free Citadels directory that, like you said, aggregates all sorts of, different flavors of liberty-minded communities. I'm also an ambassador for the Free Cities Foundation that promotes the concept of free private cities and more. Um, and I've been excited about this space for many, many years, initially starting with seasteading from probably 10 plus years ago. I've been following seasteading and then came across the concept of free private cities. There's also a book, Free Private Cities by Titus Gebel, that I read and I recommend people read. And I realized this is one potential avenue for the future, a future where people align based on their shared values and even shared interests. And of course, the internet allows us to do this um, easily online with people from all across the globe. But the final goal of most of these initiatives is to move to the land. So as Balaji Srinivasan says, it's cloud first and land later, but not land never. So eventually these initiatives crowdfund the land where they can actually build physical communities.
Yeah, well, I'm a huge fan of the idea of the digital first. I think is much easier, especially now we are like in a generation that is spending most time on social media sometimes in the actual circles of friends physically. So I believe everything can start online, and then as we progress and organizing ourselves into digital native institutions, we can think about acquiring lands and sort of stuff. So Tudor, you as a founder of the Free Citadels movement, what is the major goal for your project?
Um, I would say the movement was already, let's say, founded by people who've been at it for decades. People like Patrick Friedman and Michael Strong and Joe Quirk and many others who've been involved for many, many years. Like I said, decades. So I would say I'm just the founder of this directory, and the idea is to make it easy for newcomers in this space to figure out who's who and what's what. So I have listed all sorts of projects and people and events and even now jobs and other resources so that people can quickly get a grasp of the whole space. And I would briefly talk about some of the, let's say, categories that I have, because I think they're quite interesting and it shows what's possible in this movement, because it's not a single unitary and centralized movement. It's very decentralized, and it has different different approaches. So you have autonomous zones like Prospera and Morazan, the most well-known zones in Honduras, and then the island of Sark. Then you have Bitcoin communities, started from Bitcoin Beach, and all of the subsequent communities, Bitcoin communities started all over the world. You have digital economic zones, like Catawba in the US is a really interesting example. You have intentional communities like Liberstad in Norway. You have micronations like Liberland between Serbia and Croatia. And of course, more and more known nowadays, you have the network states like I would I would give the examples of Draper Nation, Joseon. You have these online communities that are planning to crowdfund um, physical land such as Praxis. Uh, you have pop-up communities like Zuzalu and Vitalia, and Prospera. And you also have seasteads. And a classic example is Sealand off the coast of the UK. So there are all sorts of different communities, projects in this space, and you have all these enabling organizations like the Free Cities Foundation, the Seasteading Institute, the Charter Cities Institute, startup societies, and you also have all these, um, uh, like I said, parallel initiatives that basically support uh, the movement. And maybe we'll talk about this later. But there's a lot to discover. So one insight is that when I initially started this project, this directory, I thought, maybe I'll get, I don't know, 300, 400 profiles at the maximum, and that's that. And then, maybe just update it from time to time. But now I got to around 300 published profiles, and I have around 400 still unpublished, but discovered during my research that I'm going to publish in the next couple of months. And it's still growing. And now I realize it's growing more and more each day. There's a new pop-up community. There's a new intentional community or a new network state being formed basically every week. And uh, they're called startup societies because they're quite high risk, which is normal, and some of them will fail, which is also normal, and I think we should expect that, and we shouldn't take it too hard. But some of them will succeed, and they will succeed wildly, and we will learn from them, and we will start building best practices, and the whole ecosystem is going to grow. There's more and more interest in this. There's definitely more and more interest. So I can see this movement growing every year. I've been actively involved for maybe almost 5 years, 4 years. And each year there's more people interested in this, working on something, researching, building, and so on. And more really interesting projects, and I would say high value projects.
I love that. Honestly, I believe you are doing an amazing work of mapping all the initiatives and the whole world. And to be honest, it is difficult for us to, with all going on, everything is moving so fast in terms of technology, to keep up with all the initiatives and how do they connect with each other. And I believe Free Citadels, your project, is doing an amazing work on that. So congratulations. I'll probably like to ask you in regards to the concept of citadels. So when we think about citadels, we're thinking about communities in a certain sense. So I see there's all sorts of communities as well in free citadels. Yeah, as you mentioned, it's just not like Bitcoin communities, but you also have micronations, network state, um, and knowing which one to connect with each other, it's easier to be done when you just open that up and show to people, look, this is all we have now. So feel free to explore and see with which one of them can you collaborate, incorporate. So all we have to do is again to bring information and let people know that there's a lot of things going on, and let them know what they can do in terms of collaboration. So what about culture? Culture is one of the most important things from my experience when it comes to community. So communities, they're rather easier to manage in a micro sense. So it's much easier for a small community to create a culture than a bigger community to have a culture, because different people will probably find different ways to organize themselves. So how do you see, especially thinking about the decentralized organization movement growing as well, the importance of having culture in communities in this space?
Um, I always look at history, and I look at what worked during history. And historically, communities were culturally aligned. Only in the past 100, maybe 150 years, communities or people living together are not necessarily aligned. And this is because of cities and because of the industrial revolution and because of specialization and so on. So nowadays, most people, especially if you live in the city, you don't know your neighbors, or even if you do, you don't have shared values and shared culture with them, and you don't have a shared life experience with them. So now people are building, especially people who've been kind of raised on the internet, they're building a shared culture with other people, potentially from all around the world. Language is still a big and important factor of culture, but values, I think, is becoming an even bigger factor. So people who are aligned culturally want to live together as they have as people have lived together for the past, well, since people existed. So I think this is the shift. So the industrial revolution um, and modern times basically eroded and I would say even destroyed um, community culture and community values. And now we're rebuilding that through the power of the internet. And I would dare say through the power of Bitcoin as well.
It's actually very interesting to notice how the internet became such a facilitator for people to connect with each other. And as you mentioned, it may happen that you're living in a, let's say, in a region and you don't have like any shared value with your neighbors, which is kind of like what happened like during our evolution that made us so different from each other, even though we're living close by. And sometimes you realize you have more shared values with a person that is like on a different continent. Um, so going a bit back on the internet subject, how do you see? Look, we have a lot of especially on platforms that are like, let's say, quite open for discussion, like X. We're having like we see major bubbles as well conflicting with each others, yeah, because like some have some certain type of ideology, different one might have like religions, like type of ideology as well. This happens with crypto community as well. When you think about the Bitcoin maxi and the Ethereum maxi, that becomes a certain way, some sort of religion. So in the same way, culture is really important to get people together with shared values that might also make them, let's say, way too different from the others and not have, let's say, much synergy. Because I know people that are like Bitcoin maxi that they don't believe in Ethereum ecosystem at all. Like I think like wow, this is quite, let's say, for me it's quite difficult to understand because my view is like ecosystemic. So I see different ecosystems operating parallelly, like of course autonomously, but like harmoniously as well. But once again, it might happen that we don't have the right mechanism yet to make this, let's say, highly divergent communities to work together. So, in your perspective, how we would bridge those differences between ecosystems?
I think the best way to bridge cultural differences is through the economy. So when people trade with each other, they don't care, even historically, they didn't really care if somebody was Christian or Jewish or Muslim or whatever else. If they could trade peacefully, then they would get along. So I would say the first step in aligning communities is enabling them to work together, to trade among themselves, and to just freely share information. And people tend to adopt um, practices, if not even cultures, but for sure practices that are um, potentially superior. So let the free market of well, of goods and services, and then of ideas, you know, expand and welcome everyone, and then people will choose. I think one of the most important rights that we have and we should defend is the right to first exit from whatever artificial um, constructed society we're in, and then opt in into whatever other economies or societies or communities we want to. And I think this is where cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin helps, because as we have English as the international language, whether we like it or not, we also have, um, I would say, Bitcoin as an international currency. So if people are just allowed to do business with each other freely, then I think a lot of this um, this discontent with cultural values will disappear, or at least it will uh, scale down. So
That's
in short, I would say the economy fixes a lot of things, and the free market fixes a lot of things. And we've seen this. I mean, we don't have to imagine all of this. We've seen it throughout ages. People who were allowed, and different civilizations and cultures who traded among each other and with each other, were generally peaceful. And there's this saying that when goods don't cross borders, then soldiers will. And this is what we're seeing nowadays with sanctions and all sorts of restrictions and things like this. So um, I think the easiest fix to most of our problems is just allow the free trade of goods, services, and uh, ideas.
yeah, that's absolutely brilliant, and I see it the same way as you. I believe in peace and harmony, also anything. We just have to create the right, let's say, mechanisms to let that happen naturally. I also believe in consensualism. I believe people that are willing to work with a singular particular group, they should be led to. We should not be forcing people to work with someone that they're not willing to work with, and let them arrange themselves in the way they want, just making sure they have the tools. And I think that's where our tools for the commons enter, to let them work together, even if they are not in the same, let's say, cluster, in the same citadels. So they can do trade, as you mentioned, the market will probably bridge those differences. We're moving for, let's say, from a political oriented system into a technological oriented system. That might be much more effective, because then at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter what you believe. What really matters is what works. And people, like you said as well, people at the very end of the day, all they really care is about, oh, do I have like a roof over my head? Like, do am I be able to provide food for my family? Yeah. So if the economy is thriving, people are, let's say, happy and content with the way the world is going, we'll have less conflicts. So let's probably talk about technology, because we are talking about culture and community, the social aspect of it. But I think it's important to, let's say, connect that subject with what we have today in terms of infrastructure. Yeah, so we have a lot of networks appearing, not only Bitcoin, Ethereum, of course, those ones are the most famous ones, but we should also mention about Solana, Polkadot, ICP. Yeah, so there's a lot of like networks appearing, and from my perspective, I like I don't think like we will have just those ones. Like we will have more networks. Networks will be some sort of way of, let's say, in a certain way, they might be network states as well, because you will have different protocols within a network. Not everyone in the Bitcoin community, for example, is aligned. So within the Bitcoin networks, you might have different citadels as well. How do you see this operating?
Sure, I think it also comes down to the free market, and the same way we had in the past societies that operated on silver or even other precious metals, uh, we will have different blockchains and competing. And it's good. Competition always brings out the best in these projects, and the best practices and the best technologies can be adopted and adapted. For example, Bitcoin took a lot of things from Litecoin, and Ethereum, improved some things that weren't working properly on Bitcoin, and it kind of forced Bitcoin to readjust and adapt as well. So I see this competition between different protocols as a good thing, and the fact that we're talking about technology, it means that these sort of innovations can be easily or more easily copy pasted from one network to another. And so things that innovations that in the past took dozens, if not hundreds of years to adopt, now it can be done, within days or maybe years, but anyway, way faster than that. And speaking about technology, I'm also more recently got more excited about biotech and longevity. There's clear progress being made on this front. Vitalia is a clear example of this. Uh, there's more capital coming into this space. There's health span capital, for example, investing in biotech companies. So I see this as something that's enabling people to live longer, live healthier, and it's also helping the goal of making people live a more prosperous and happier uh, lives. So I'm and AI, of course. Now I don't want to list all of the buzzwords, but you cannot not be excited about uh, longevity and AI because there's clearly something there. There's clearly something there. I was skeptical at the beginning where I thought it's going to take decades to unravel, but things seem to be accelerating. On all fronts. And I think this is an opportunity for people to build or to join projects. I don't think everyone should be building their own network state. I think most people should join existing initiatives. Um, and one way, just to add one more thing, I think one way to do this is to get to meet other people who are interested in this space, and probably the best way to do it before moving next to each other is to go to conferences and to pop up communities. So one conference that I've attended every year and I invite everyone to attend is the Liberty in Our Lifetime conference happening in Prague this November, organized by the Free Cities Foundation, where there's going to be hundreds of people, all of them really interesting. You don't have time to speak to all of them and hear all the interesting projects that they're working on. Um, and I know Vitalia is organizing new pop-up cities in Prospera, focused on different niches and industry around longevity and biotech. Balaji is organizing his network state conference in September, and then he just announced that there's going to be a network school for 3 months for people interested in building these communities. So there's a lot of things happening offline and online. Now I saw that I recently started using Noster social network as an alternative for Twitter, and it's quite interesting. I'm a bit late to the party, but it's interesting, and I'm learning. And there are other things being built on Nostr right now. There's a social network for Bitcoin communities and nomads called Satlantis, and yeah, there's just exciting stuff happening all across.
Yeah, look, I think the simplest way we can put it all together is we're living like the fourth industrial revolution. Because and we can like spend the whole days here pulling it up, like all the sorts of buzzwords. And believe me, I went through the spectacle phase, but we cannot deny that all those like single technology are like people sometimes they might be embracing AI more than blockchain, and vice versa, but they're equally important and they complement each other. I think it is interesting, really, for whoever is listening, to have an ecosystemical perspective of everything that is happening. Don't be too much like, let's say, entangled in a cluster because you might be missing the whole picture. So we're heading to the end of this episode. Tudor, it was amazing to have you here. We have 10 minutes left, but I think we have still some bandwidth talking about, because we are talking about cutting edge technologies and initiatives, but the work is still very centralized. And even thinking about, for example, we are talking about social medias like X and LinkedIn. Uh, they are, let's say, we see a clash between the political establishment, the governments, and those, let's say, digital native institutions, because they are indeed, like in a certain way, social medias are becoming their own country. Some of them they even might have their own currency, and still we see this clash. And from my perspective, as soon as we move from Web 2 to Web 2.5, let's say with Meta, with X having their own, let's say, metaverse or ecosystem, that would should also facilitate all the decentralized initiatives. So how do you see this, let's say, leap from moving from Web 2 to Web 2.5 and Web 3.0?
I think there's a clear need for decentralization because the 20th century has been quite centralizing in many ways. So the nation states are by definition centralized, and we moved away from the power of smaller communities in the previous centuries to a centralized power, um, theoretically built on the concept of nation. If we look at the maps of the past, we see all of these big empires, but if we carefully study the issue, we realize that although the map shows them as big creatures, ruling over a large piece of land. Actually, there was a lot more uh, power in the local communities. Um, and I think this is what this century is about. It's about the power going closer and closer to the smaller minority, the smallest minority, which is the individual. So I believe in the power of smaller communities as opposed to big centralizing entities. And I think technology is enabling this, especially the internet, especially um, AI and Bitcoin. And there's basically almost all technologies are giving more power to the individuals and to communities, and they're uh, taking power away from uh, unelected bureaucrats. And it might not be obvious to everyone, but I think this is the overall trend, at least in the past, I would say 20, 30 years.
Yeah. To be honest, I'm quite positive about the future. I know there's a lot of negativity going on, especially let's see, on the mainstream media, they have uh, they're quite, let's say, aligned with the political establishment. So they move towards their own agendas, and sometimes well, their interests are not like very well aligned with the humanity, let's say, agenda. So I think more important is to look to the right things, seeing that's the light at the end of the tunnel. There's a lot of things going on in decentralized ecosystem. I believe there is still, let's say, road that we have to go through. I don't believe Rome was built in one day, but we are moving from the physical to the digital, and I believe it should be that way. It should be increasingly digital, and let's say improve the way we organize ourselves to, let's say, to achieve goals collectively, consensually, more importantly. And I think that's is it. There, once again, was a pleasure to have you here. I'll leave just you a few minutes so you can probably talk here about your on social medias. Whoever is listening can reach out to you. I know you're on LinkedIn. I'm not sure if you're quite active on X. I'm quite big right there as well. Like, are there the major social media to connecting with communities are those ones? So feel free to talk about your social medias as well.
Yeah, so my goal right now is to keep growing Free Citadels, to have the whole movement, listed and mapped out there. So I'm gonna be developing that site, that directory. With that, I'm on X and LinkedIn, and like I said, just started out on Noster, which is a decentralized protocol for social communication. Um, I would say that's about it. I'm excited about the future. I'm proud to be in this movement and make my small contribution to it. I'm inspired by people who came before us and who didn't actually see where this movement would lead. You know, people like I said, people like Patri Friedman and Michael Strong and Joe Quirk have been talking about uh, this movement and these ideas for a long time, and they probably didn't expect uh, to see it happening, and now we have Zeres in Honduras, and we have people living there, and Prospera is growing very successfully, and people are thriving in Morazan. There's um, Alex, a resident of Morazan, who posts every week about how their community is doing. So these are real places. If you had to point fingers at, you know, uh, existing projects 10 years ago, you didn't have many projects to showcase, but now you have more and more projects growing. And like I said, Sark is a really exciting and probably under appreciated and maybe under the radar project happening in Europe, and Liberstad in Norway, and Liberland and Montelibero in Montenegro, and I cannot name all of the projects but it's really exciting. People are actually building both digitally and physically, and uh, as the meme goes, it's happening. It's happening. This is the time to join this movement, and I encourage everyone to explore. I encourage everyone to keep an open mind to all of these initiatives, to all of these technologies, and I think the future overall is very bright.
Absolutely agree with you. I think the best way for us to let everyone know what's going on is to invite them to visit Free Citadels. Because as you mentioned, there's so
Sure.
many initiatives and we could keep going here for hours and we wouldn't even like, let's say, script the whole thing. So Tudor, once again, thank you so much for your time today. I love what you're doing. I really believe in the importance of having transparency and more even making it visible so people are, they can just reach out to a central hub and see everything that they have available and explore themselves. So I think that's it, guys. Thank you so much for our audience. Next week we come back with a new Diffusion podcast episode, and bye.